95% of traders believe trading is impossible. They blow accounts, they quit, they call the market rigged, they swear algorithms are hunting their stops, and eventually they walk away convinced that the game was never meant to be won. They blame institutions, manipulation, market makers, news events, volatility, anything that protects their ego from confronting a harder truth. Meanwhile, 5% of traders operate in the exact same markets and quietly experience something very different. To them, trading isn't dramatic or chaotic, it's structured, it's systematic, it's almost boring. Same charts, same data, same 24 hours in a day. The difference isn't intelligence, and it isn't access to secret information. The difference is psychological. Some of the smartest people I know have blown multiple accounts: engineers, doctors, PhDs in mathematics. People who can solve complex equations and build software systems from scratch. Intelligence does not immunize you against trading failure. In fact, sometimes it makes things worse because intelligent people tend to overcomplicate. It's also not about capital. Whether someone starts with $500 or $100,000, the failure rate stays shockingly similar. And it's definitely not about information, because today everyone has access to the same charts, the same news feeds, the same economic calendars, and the same social media commentary. So if it's not intelligence, capital, or information, what separates the 95% from the 5%? The difference is this: the 95% are fighting a war they can't win. The 5% are playing a game they already understand. Most traders approach the market like it's an opponent that needs to be conquered. They believe that if they analyze enough, optimize enough, and learn enough, they will eventually unlock certainty. They are chasing prediction. The 5% aren't chasing certainty at all. They've accepted that uncertainty is permanent. They don't try to eliminate it, they build around it. Let me explain with a simple contrast. David was a software engineer, brilliant by any measurable standard. When he discovered trading, he treated it like every other technical problem he had solved in his life. If something didn't work, he added more data. If results were inconsistent, he optimized. His charts were filled with indicators, moving averages layered on top of other moving averages, oscillators stacked beneath oscillators, Fibonacci retracements drawn across every visible swing. He monitored economic releases, tracked sentiment indicators, studied institutional positioning, and consumed hours of market commentary before the open. His routine felt productive. It felt intelligent. It felt disciplined. After 18 months, he had blown through 4 accounts, not because he was lazy, not because he lacked effort, but because he was addicted to complexity. Every loss convinced him he needed more information. Every losing streak pushed him deeper into analysis. Instead of simplifying, he expanded. Instead of refining execution, he chased certainty. He believed the solution to uncertainty was more intelligence. Now, compare that to Sarah. Outcome. The house wins because it has an outcome. The house wins because it has a small statistical edge and executes it relentlessly over thousands of repetitions. She approached trading the same way. She had 3 rules. She only traded during specific hours where her testing showed a measurable advantage. She risked exactly 1% per trade, no exceptions, and she exited at predetermined levels, whether the trade was in profit or loss. That was the entire system. No constant adjustments, no emotional overrides, no expanding complexity. 18 months later, her account was steadily growing, not explosively, not dramatically, but consistently. The difference between David and Sarah wasn't intelligence, it was philosophy. David was trying to remove uncertainty. Sarah had accepted it and built her strategy around it. And this is the first major reason trading feels impossible for most people. It violates everything you've been taught about success. In school, studying more increases your odds of a better grade. In most careers, working more hours increases output. In life, effort usually correlates with results. Trading doesn't reward effort the same way. More analysis doesn't necessarily improve decisions. More trades don't necessarily increase income. More information doesn't necessarily produce clarity. In fact, in trading, more often makes things worse. This creates a psychological conflict. Your brain craves structure and predictability. It wants to know what happens next. It wants control. When you don't have that control, your mind tries to manufacture it. You add indicators, you tweak strategies, you search for the perfect combination that eliminates losing trades. You convince yourself that somewhere out there exists a system that removes doubt. But trading is built on probabilities, not certainty. There is no configuration that removes losses. There is no level of intelligence that predicts every move. The 5% understand something that the 95% resist. You do not need to know what happens next. You only need to execute your edge consistently over time. The second reason trading feels impossible is the immediacy of feedback. In most professions, results are delayed. You work on a project for months before evaluation. You study for years before earning credentials. There is emotional distance between action and outcome. Trading offers no such buffer. You click buy, and within seconds, your account balance fluctuates. Your nervous system interprets that fluctuation as threat. Heart rate rises, muscles tense, your brain shifts into defense mode. In that state, discipline deteriorates, stops get widened, profits get taken too early. Revenge trades get triggered. Emotional reactions disguise themselves as logical decisions. The 95% operate inside this feedback loop constantly. Every tick feels personal. Every loss feels like failure. The 5% create distance from it, not because they lack emotion, but because they've reframed what matters. One trade is irrelevant, 10 trades are irrelevant. What matters is the integrity of execution across hundreds of trades. They measure success by adherence to rules, not by the result of a single outcome. That shift alone neutralizes much of the emotional chaos. The third trap is complexity addiction. Complexity feels sophisticated. It feels intelligent. Learning a new strategy feels like progress. Adding a new tool feels productive. But markets don't reward how much you know. They reward how consistently you execute. There's a point where additional information stops helping and starts clouding judgment. Each added variable introduces hesitation. Each added signal increases internal conflict. The traders who succeed simplify aggressively. They remove anything that does not directly improve execution clarity. They operate with fewer variables, fewer inputs, and fewer decisions. Under pressure, simplicity survives. Complexity collapses. Most traders never make that shift. They stay trapped in the illusion that more effort equals more profit. They never realize that in trading, discipline beats intelligence, and consistency beats sophistication. And this is where we pause, because understanding why trading feels impossible is the foundation. But understanding how the 5% turn it into something obvious, that's the transformation. Now we move into the deeper layers because complexity and uncertainty aren't the only forces working against you. There's something even more subtle that destroys traders long before their strategy does. It's outcome obsession. Most traders measure their self-worth in daily profit and loss. A green day feels like validation. A red day feels like failure. They open their platform not just to manage positions, but to check their emotional status. Up means smart. Down means wrong. Over time, this creates a psychological roller coaster that has nothing to do with skill and everything to do with attachment. The problem is simple. You do not control outcomes. You control execution. You don't control whether this particular trade works. You don't control whether today is a trending session or a choppy one. You don't control whether news hits unexpectedly. You control whether you followed your rules. That's it. The 5% internalize this deeply. They redefine what a successful day means. A successful day isn't one where money was made. It's one where the plan was executed precisely. If the trade followed the rules and lost, it was still a good trade. If the trade broke rules and won, it was still a bad trade. That mental separation protects confidence and builds long-term consistency. When you obsess over outcomes, you begin to trade your P&L instead of your system. You hesitate after losses, you get reckless after wins, you widen stops to avoid being wrong, you cut winners short to lock in validation. The market becomes an emotional mirror, but when you obsess over process, you stabilize. Your confidence is no longer tied to randomness, it's tied to discipline, and discipline compounds. Then there's information overload. Modern traders are drowning in opinions, social media analysis, newsletters, YouTube breakdowns, Discord alerts, economic commentary. Every voice sounds confident. Every argument sounds convincing. The more you consume, the more fragmented your conviction becomes. One analyst says bullish continuation, another says distribution phase, another says wait for confirmation. By the time your setup appears, your head is full of conflicting narratives. At a certain point, more information doesn't improve decisions. It paralyzes them. The 5% practice something that feels counterintuitive. Strategic ignorance. They deliberately limit what they consume. They know their system. They know their criteria. Everything outside of that is filtered out. This doesn't make them uninformed. It makes them focused. They protect mental clarity the same way they protect capital, because without clarity, execution deteriorates. But the deepest shift isn't tactical. It's identity. The 95% identify as profit seekers. They see themselves as traders trying to make money. Every trade becomes a test of their intelligence. Every drawdown becomes a threat to their identity. That fragility creates emotional instability. The 5% identify differently. They see themselves as rule executors. Their identity is tied to discipline, not outcome. They are professionals of process. A losing day doesn't threaten who they are because they did their job. A winning day doesn't inflate them because it was simply math playing out over time. This identity shift creates psychological durability, and durability is what keeps you in the game long enough for probabilities to work. There's one more uncomfortable truth that most people resist. Trading, when done correctly, is boring. Not occasionally boring, consistently boring. Long stretches of watching, waiting, doing nothing, then brief moments of focused execution, then back to waiting again. There is no constant adrenaline, no dramatic storytelling, no emotional fireworks, just repetition. The 95% cannot tolerate this boredom. They equate activity with productivity. They manufacture trades to feel engaged. They chase volatility because stillness feels like stagnation. But boredom is not the enemy. Boredom is evidence that you are not forcing action. Boredom is discipline in disguise. The 5% understand that capital and mental energy are finite resources. Every unnecessary trade drains both. They conserve, they wait for clarity, they strike when probability aligns, then they step back again. It's not flashy, it's not entertaining, but it works. And this is the final realization. Trading only feels impossible when you demand it to be something it is not. When you demand certainty in an uncertain environment. When you demand excitement from a discipline that rewards patience. When you demand constant validation from a probability-based system. The moment you stop fighting what trading actually is, it becomes simpler. Not easier, but simpler. You stop trying to predict. You start executing. You stop measuring daily profit. You start measuring rule adherence. You stop adding complexity. You start removing it. You stop consuming everything. You start filtering aggressively. You stop chasing money. You become a disciplined executor. That's when the shift happens. Trading stops feeling like a war. It becomes a structured routine. It becomes methodical, almost boring. And boring is powerful. The market doesn't change. The volatility doesn't change. The uncertainty doesn't change. What changes is you. The difference between the 95% and the 5% isn't secret knowledge. It isn't a magical indicator. It isn't access to institutional flow. It's the willingness to simplify, to accept uncertainty, and to execute consistently without emotional drama. The market will still offer opportunities tomorrow. It always does. The only question is whether you'll still be disciplined enough to take them. When you kill complexity, kill outcome obsession, and kill the need for certainty, something unexpected happens. Trading stops feeling impossible and starts feeling obvious.